When our natural resources on Earth were depleted, there was no alternative but to seek new frontiers. Thus, a brave team was sent into space to mine riches on an unmapped planet. However, upon arrival, they encountered a deadly threat that was not part of the plan and could exterminate them all without hesitation. Shifting focus, the situation on Earth was equally dire. 3 years ago, a virus that attacks plants began devastating our ecosystems. This virus not only destroys vegetation, but also makes those who eat these plants seriously ill with immune system problems. Moreover, with fewer plants, the oxygen in the air decreased to 10%, causing an increase in natural disasters worldwide. The best scientists on the planet were baffled, and so far, no cure had been found. Everyone was beginning to lose hope that we would be able to turn things around. In this chaotic scenario, a light at the end of the tunnel emerged. Project Gemini, an initiative by Dr. Stephen, based on 2 alien artifacts that some paleontologists found a while ago. These objects are so ancient that they date back to a time when no life existed here. Dr. Stephen's team not only studied these incredibly resilient materials, but also managed to replicate them. With this, they built a spacecraft capable of exploring galaxies without a crew, finding a planet that seemed good to start anew. The sphere, one of the artifacts, has the ability to create life, and after much puzzling, the team managed to understand how it works. This also confirms the theory that life here began with extraterrestrial help. Now, a group of doctors and military pilots is ready to try creating this new Earth, Earth 2.0, in a solar system called TES, a few hundred light years away. Dr. Stephen, who is married to Amy, is at the heart of this risky mission. Amy, with her heart in her mouth, does not want him to go. On the day of the launch, she runs to the base, trying to make him reconsider, but arrives too late and can only watch as the ship takes off, leaving Earth behind. To make matters worse, a suspicious crack appears in the alien sphere, just as they are leaving the atmosphere. The ship uses alien engine technology to open a portal that warps space, allowing them to traverse the universe in the blink of an eye. However, something goes wrong right after the jump. They do not arrive at the TES system, but somewhere unknown. Frustrated and worried, Stephen blames engineer Peter, accusing him of miscalculating the coordinates and relieving him of his duties. After trying to relax a bit, Stephen finds himself thinking of Amy and that time when he activated the sphere for the first time, visualizing a bizarre humanoid silhouette that evaporated almost instantly. He requests the team to do their best to determine the trajectory of the jump made, but they quickly discover that this is impractical. The data is all scrambled, as if dancing between the 3rd and 4th dimensions. Meanwhile, restless and isolated in his technical cubicle, Peter decides to grab one of the security cameras to examine the sphere on his own. At that exact moment, the main computer sounds an alarm informing that the repair hatch has been opened and an unidentified object is approaching. Everyone is shocked to see Peter, now frozen, floating in the vacuum of space. Dr. David speculates that Peter couldn't bear the weight of his mistake and chose a tragic end for himself, but Dr. Leona, who has known Peter for years, vehemently rejects this theory, insisting he would never do such a thing. Frustrated and impatient, Stephen criticizes Leona for her emotion and assigns her to take over Peter's responsibilities. Later, in a moment of vulnerability, David confesses that the loss of his daughter almost drove him to commit the same desperate act, but he decided that he could still be useful. Now, with the mission seeming endless, he feels desolate again, but Stephen assures him that together they will find a way out. It is then that the ship finds a planet composed entirely of volcanic rock. Despite the absence of oxygen, the external conditions are not hostile, indicating that they would only need respiratory masks to explore it. Stephen sees this as the perfect opportunity to execute his plan and is eager to land, but Captain Ryan intervenes, warning that the analysis of the planet is not yet complete and that Stephen is recklessly compromising everyone's safety. Stephen, however, ignores the protests and firmly declares that the final decisions are his. The team prepares to descend to the planet in a space shuttle, while Officer Richard stays on the mothership. As they approach the planet, a violent storm surprises them, forcing them to activate the braking thrusters to reduce the descent speed, which depletes all available fuel, and eliminates the possibility of return. This risky maneuver becomes their only chance of survival. As soon as the shuttle touches the ground, the entire crew passes out, and on the threshold between consciousness and sleep, Stephen dreams of the moment he gave Amy a bracelet made from a fragment of the ancient sphere, symbolizing the union of the two most important things in his life. Immediately after regaining consciousness, the team wastes no time and gets back to work. Fortunately, the space shuttle did not suffer significant damage, but the fuel is at its limit, leaving them stranded there. For Stephen, this is not a problem. After all, the mission was to remain on the planet for 4 years, and even though they did not land at the planned location, he is optimistic about the possibility of using one of the large local caves as a shelter for the sphere. Meanwhile, a disturbing discovery occurs in the hidden corners of the shuttle. A viscous substance begins to ooze down the walls. At the same time, on the mothership, Richard inspects the other compartments and finds the same sticky substance, along with the camera that had gone missing. The crew then appropriately suits up for the external environment and transports the sphere to the selected cave, successfully activating it. After ensuring that the sphere is operational, they return to the shuttle to begin data collection and analysis. However, Ryan abruptly interrupts the activities to declare that martial law has been imposed on the mission. He justifies his decision by sharing a disturbing video sent by Richard, footage of Peter recording himself while inspecting the sphere, a precaution against future accusations of error. The video shows the moment Peter opens the engine door and is attacked by something moving in the shadows, which violently assaults him before throwing him out of the ship. The camera fails to clearly capture the creature, but Richard clarifies that after reviewing all the footage, he concluded that the alien has been with them since Earth, hidden inside the sphere like a Trojan horse, probably causing the failure in the space jump. And now, the creature is on the planet with them, detectable by the interference it causes in the electromagnetic field. The revelation is interrupted by David, who notices an anomaly in the system. The sphere is running an unknown program, different from the one initially loaded. Anxious, Stephen wants to immediately check the sphere, but Ryan stops him, accusing him of hiding vital information. He reveals that Richard also discovered recordings of Stephen seeing the strange humanoid form on Earth months earlier, proving that Stephen knew of the potential risk and did not share it, indirectly implicating him in Peter's death. Distressed by the accusations, Stephen hurriedly leaves the room, reflecting on all the effort and dedication he and David had invested in the project. Stephen was uncertain about David's presence on the mission, considering his recent grief over the loss of his daughter. However, David insisted that he was prepared and motivated by the idea of building a better world, a place where tragedies like his daughter's would not be repeated. Driven by this conviction, he eventually convinced Stephen. Shortly after, in a tense moment, Stephen sought out David, proposing that they escape together through the airlock to inspect the sphere without Ryan's knowledge. David hesitated initially, worried about defying Ryan's orders, but the memories of his daughter and the desire to protect the future made him change his mind. When they arrived at the cave, they were shocked. The sphere was generating extraterrestrial life at an alarmingly accelerated rate due to a configuration adjustment that none of them had authorized. Stephen dove into adjusting the sphere's controls, ignoring David's pleas to reconsider and discuss the plan with the whole group. Meanwhile, David, alert, monitored the radar and noticed the extraterrestrial approaching. In a desperate gesture to move Stephen, he fired a warning shot. Stephen reacted by drawing his own weapon, but the tension was interrupted by the creature's imminent arrival at the cave. Quickly, Stephen tore a fragment of the sphere to take with him, and the two ran for safety, guided by the sinister shadows and threatening noises the creature emitted. They managed to see the full form of the being just before escaping to the shuttle and sealing the hatch. Back in the precarious safety of the shuttle, David scolded Stephen for his recklessness, but Stephen, obstinate, defended the vital importance of the sphere and vowed he wouldn't hesitate to use his weapon if necessary. It was then that Ryan appeared, equally furious, criticizing Stephen's actions. The argument heated up, and Ryan ended up physically assaulting Stephen just as the computer emitted an urgent alarm. Leona, alerted by the alarm, went to investigate and found a corridor flooded with the viscous substance. Before she could process what was happening, She was pulled back to another area of the module. It was Frank, bringing even more alarming news. The extraterrestrial had pierced the lower part of the cover and infiltrated the landing module. In an effort to find refuge, they hid in the lab, where the air became heavy and difficult to breathe. Then the lights went out, and a bizarre noise began to echo from the plant units behind them, signaling the imminent presence of the extraterrestrial in the same confined space. Frank urgently pushed Leona out of the room, and as she ran down the corridor, Frank's agonizing screams echoed behind her. The extraterrestrial had killed him. Terrified and gasping, Leona reached the control room and shared the terrible news with the rest of the team. Hearing this, Ryan exploded in anger at Steven, blaming him for having inadvertently brought the creature with them. The extraterrestrial had not only made a hole in the hull, but also damaged the generator. And now, with the security cameras down, they were blind, with no visual contact with Richard or any part of the ship. The only way out would be to reactivate the backup generator, an almost impossible task without being able to track the extraterrestrial's movements. Feeling the weight of his responsibility, Steven volunteered to do the task. Armed and cautious, he headed to the generator and, with some effort, managed to restore the communication system. The team, now with access to tracking, alerted Steven that the extraterrestrial was nearby. As he tried to return, sinister noises filled the air around him. Fortunately, Ryan acted quickly, pulling Steven back into the control room. Together, they quickly formulate a plan to expel the creature from the ship. Leona, acting under pressure, opens the airlock hatches followed by the lab door, and runs to hide in another room. The extraterrestrial, attracted by the opening, begins to move through the airlock. Richard tries to activate the engine to burn it, but the creature's interference blocks the signal. In a moment of panic, Steven runs to save his life, and Leona comes out to help him. At the last second, Richard manages to regain control of the engine and fires it up, hitting the creature with an intense flame. Though wounded, the creature is not deterred and advances in an attempt to reach Steven, who is desperately pulled back inside the ship by David. One of the creature's tentacles, however, injures David's arm just as they manage to close the door, leaving part of the tentacle trapped and the creature retreating to the cave. Quickly, Ryan closes the airlocks while the others work to seal the hole in the hull. In the midst of the brief relief, the team finds Frank's body, a sight that devastates everyone and painfully reminds Steven of Amy. She had begged him not to go on the mission, mentioning not only that she was working on a vaccine, but also revealing that she was pregnant, a new life that made Steven question his choices. Even with Amy's emotional pleas for him to stay, Steven had made his decision. He believed that saving the planet was a cause greater than any personal matter. Meanwhile, David, with his arm wounded by the alien tentacle, heads to the lab to receive first aid, while Steven examines the piece of the tentacle he had ripped from the creature. The analysis reveals something surprising. The creature was a bio-robot, built from the same enigmatic material as the sphere. This suggested that the sphere was designed to create these monsters from the start. Steven shares with David that the tentacle had infected him with a bacterium possessing an extremely potent defense mechanism. Steven's blood, now altered by the infection, could be the key to developing a vaccine capable of saving Earth. In the midst of their investigations, as he cuts into the tentacle, the lab lights begin to flicker erratically. Steven recalls the vision he had on Earth, realizing that the extraterrestrial functioned as a transponder, a colonization tool used by its species. Determined, Steven decides they need to eliminate the extraterrestrial and reconfigure the sphere. However, Ryan, fearing more recklessness, locks Steven in the lab, accusing him of endangering everyone with his obsession. Ryan insinuates that Steven sees lives as disposable, and David agrees, criticizing Steven for his desire to be seen as a hero without true regard for humanity. These accusations remind Steven of his last fight with Amy, when she accused him of having a savior complex before taking off her bracelet and leaving. While still isolated in the lab, Steven formulates a theory that Richard confirms after reviewing the travel records. They had not only jumped through space but also through time. They were still on Earth, but 4 billion years in the past, before any life existed. The sphere they brought was the same one that would be discovered by paleontologists in the future. With this revelation, Steven becomes emotional upon realizing that the fragment of the sphere he had collected was the same one that would, in the future, be turned into Amy's bracelet. He begins to write a message on this fragment, teaching Amy how to activate the sphere they would leave behind. Meanwhile, in the present, Amy, still in the lab, deals with the painful news that the mission has failed. Suddenly, Richard brings even more alarming news. Ryan was preparing explosives to destroy the sphere and had disabled his radio to block any attempts at dissuasion. Stephen asks Richard to reopen the airlock, and upon exiting he confronts Ryan, ready to detonate the bombs. Stephen then tries to convince Ryan that there is a better solution than simply destroying the sphere. Stephen's conversation with Ryan is abruptly cut short by an unexpected shot that hits Ryan, killing him instantly. It's David, who managed to escape through the airlock. The infection seems to have affected his sanity, making him believe he was chosen by the extraterrestrial to correct humanity, which he now sees as an anomaly of the sphere. In a moment of desperation, Stephen throws Leona's Rubik's Cube against the wall, using it as a distraction to shoot David, who, injured, flees hastily. Quickly, Stephen activates the bomb and runs, firing a flare to attract the attention of the extraterrestrial. He leads it on a frantic chase to the control room, where he manages to lock it in. But as he runs through the corridors, David, still gripped by paranoia, opens fire on him. Stephen hides, but the extraterrestrial, relentless, breaks down the door and advances toward him. With a quick shot, Stephen manages to momentarily drive it away. As he tries to escape, he returns to the control room, where he finds David once again, ready to attack him. Before David can act, the extraterrestrial intervenes, killing David and allowing Stephen to flee the shuttle seconds before the bomb detonates, eradicating the creature. Exhausted and weakened, Stephen collapses outdoors. Shortly after, Richard wakes him up, trying to establish contact. Richard expresses his desire to rescue him, but a storm prevents his advance. Stephen, with a firm voice, instructs Richard to stay safe while he returns to the cave to try to use the sphere. Meanwhile, in the present, Amy, upon finding her bracelet again, discovers Stephen's message. Using it, she activates the sphere, creating a momentary link between past and present. Stephen and Amy reconnect briefly, a meeting that transcends time. He quickly shares the vaccine formula and declares his love before the connection breaks. Stephen then succumbs to the lack of oxygen in the cave. Amy, now aware of her loss, mourns the death of her husband. Months later, Amy dedicates herself to raising her child, who is born healthy thanks to the vaccine developed. Despite her deep grief, she finds solace knowing that the vaccine is contributing to improving Earth, a legacy of Stephen's love and sacrifice. And thus, the film ends.